Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Lichter, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project for the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I am a member of the Kenosha History Center and have volunteered there since 2015. We hope that you will enjoy these programs. I'm with Terry Wetley, a former employee of Dynamatic Corporation, Kenosha. Hello and welcome, Terry.
Hello.
So when did you start working at Dynamatic?
I started in 1990, and I was there until 2001.
Are you originally from Kenosha?
No, I came here when I was 19 years old. I grew up in Elroy, Wisconsin, home of Tommy Thompson. That's what we're famous for. And then I came down here, and I've been here ever since. I came down here to go on a vacation. It was a 2-week vacation. I ended up getting a job at Quaker, and I've been here ever since.
Ever since. So your background is in machinist?
Yeah.
Machining?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you started working at Dynamatic in
1990.
1990, 2004. And what was that like? How did that hiring process work for you?
Okay. Well, at that time, they actually had 2 people for human resources, and the lady that I was working with was named Dawn Korth. And they were interviewing for 2 positions. A friend of mine, Dave Capodarco, and myself were looking for jobs, and we both went there and applied. During the interview process, Dawn asked me about Dave, and I couldn't say enough good things about him. Highly skilled. I told him if she was smart, she would hire him, and she did. The second position was already, they had somebody in mind for. So I went home, and then probably like 2 weeks later, I got a call from Dawn, and that second person didn't work out. And now and then she asked me if I was still interested, and then I came in and I got the job. So it worked out pretty good for me.
And at Dynamatic at the time, what products or services did that industry provide?
Well, we did the eddy current motor, and they did everything from the fractionals, the 1/4 horse, half, 3/4, 1 horsepower motors, and then they did the larger ones that would start, and they could be 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 horsepower, all the way up to what they used to call the belt lines, and they were used to run the lines at the GM plant in Janesville. And they would send in these belt lines, and they were almost as tall as this ceiling here. They were just huge. And they would tear them apart, and they would repair them, and then they would send them back. But it was a wide variety from smaller motors all the way up to these big press drives.
Okay. And what department did you work in?
I was a machinist. I started out in a shaft center. I worked with 3 Bobs, Bob Tolfrey, Bob Cooks, and Bob Yorks. And I worked with Tolfrey for 6 months, training. And the machine you'd literally take a 20-foot piece of steel, cut it to the lengths that you needed the shafts in your motor. You'd set it in a drill press. You'd drill, tap the end, put a live center on the other end, and then that would fit inside your lathe. Live center on one side, either side, and then it would spin, and then you would cut it to whatever they wanted in lengths, your bearing journals, anything that needed to be done on that shaft, and that would be the center part of your motor. So I worked in shaft center, like I said, probably I had 5 years in there total.
Now, did they have different shifts?
No, they did. They had first and second. Of course, I trained on first. Then I went to second. And I was with probably about 6 other machinists. And you were pretty well self-sufficient on second shift. You were the inspector. You set up all your own gauging. You set up your machine. And you gave them a complete part. You would get castings, and if you got 8 castings, they wanted 8 good ones. So they were real strict on quality. They wanted a quality product the first time out.
Was that a union shop?
Yeah, it was union. As a machinist, I was local lodge 34. The UAW 72 on it's Washington and 39th out there. It's just out by Bradford. That was our union hall. And Rick Dodge was the head of the union at that time for us. And he was an alderman and very instrumental in helping the machinists like myself get a journeyman's card. Once I had enough time in there, the local Lodge 34 provided us with journeyman's card. And once you had that, you could pretty much work anywhere you wanted. You could find a job in a machine shop somewhere, anytime you wanted.
What were the requirements then to become a journeyman? Training and
Training and time on the job, you know. So you know, when I was at Ganton, we did blueprint reading, mechanical drawings, pretty wide variety. When I came from Ganton, I was pretty well trained in CNC machining. Now, Dynamatic actually had NC machining, and that was numerical controlled machines, and they were ran by a tape. Almost just like your reel-to-reel tape. They would have a tape, they would come out and they would put it in your machine, and that would have your basic program that you would run. And of course, that was the first step into the CNC machining. Then it went to computerized numerical centers. But their original machines were all tape controlled.
So what did you make an hour when you started in 1990?
I think I was, you know, because when I was at Ganton, I was like $10, $11 an hour. And I think they boosted me to like $14 an hour. When I was at, my first job was $3.85. That's what when I came here in 1980, 79, my first job was at Quaker Stretcher, and I made $3.85 an hour. So the $15 an hour, 14, at that time was very good pay.
In your work in the shop you worked in there, what was your workspace like? Did the company provide tools? Was there safety equipment?
Okay, well, of course, all machinists had to wear steel-toed boots or shoes, and I always wore extra heavy hearing protection, earplugs with muffs over the top of them, because it was loud. You're in a machine shop, you know. It was a loud place. My work area consisted of like 2 or 3 operations. You didn't normally just do one part of a machining. You did a series of steps to it. You may machine the hub here, and then drill and tap it here, and then you would put it in the wash, so when it came out you had a finished product. So it was set up in a cycle, and then during that cycle they tried to keep you busy, you know, to where you were doing something for them all the time.
Did they provide all the tools you needed?
You know, all machinists have some private tools, whether it's depth mics, 0 to 6 inch calipers, 0 to 1 inch mics, stuff that I still have today. I still have it, but they provided all the big stuff, you know, all the large calipers. They provided a good share of it.
So what was a typical day like? Did you have to punch in the morning?
Punch in every day, yep. Punch clock in. Then, you know, it got pretty quiet on second shift. Like I said, there was only 6 of us, and our main pastime during lunch hour is we played chess. A lot of guys like to play chess or cards. It was a small group, you know, only 5 or 6 people, so you got to be friends with most everybody there.
If you had a question or a problem or a challenge on your job, what was who would you contact about that?
Well, when I first started, I told you there's the 3 Bobs, and between the 3 of them, they had a vast amount of knowledge. I didn't really do much with Bob Yorks, but Bob Tofree and Bobby Cooks, you know, if I had a question, and it was funny, Bobby Cooks told me this. When I started, I was a machine operator, and he told me when I'd leave, I would be a machinist, capable of setting up and doing everything myself. And his definition of a journeyman was somebody who knew how to fix all his own mistakes. And I kind of, and at the time, I kind of thought it was funny, when he was telling me this, but sure enough, as I was there long enough, I found that to be true. So I learned a lot from those gentlemen. I really can't say enough about them.
Over the 15 years or so that you worked there, were there changes in the work or in the business?
The biggest change, and probably, is they put in a system called Macola. It was a computer system that ran through a mainframe here, but then they had little terminals out on the floor, not like today's where everybody has their own little computer in their hand. And that I learned the Macola system from one end to the other. And I think that gave me a definite advantage, because a lot of the older people didn't want to learn anything new. They didn't want a new system. They didn't want a new Macola. They didn't want a new system for shipping and receiving where they had to do the stickers to put on the boxes and all of those things. So it was there's a little reluctance, on some of the older people, but all in all, the changes they made were good for the company. And a lot of those older people, once they started learning it, I think they found out they were capable of learning more and doing more than they thought they would. And I think they actually enjoyed it once they kind of figured out what was going on with it.
Mm-hmm. How did you get to work?
I drove a car. I was 10 minutes from my house. I had went into a salary position through Don LaPlante, was a plant manager, and I'd still be there. It was a 10-minute drive from my house. It was a job I liked. It was people I worked with and I spent time with. I liked them. It's unfortunate that the business went into bankruptcy and went under. But we had this conversation a little bit earlier. The brand name went to a company called DSI. And it's DSI / Dynamatic, and they are in Racine now. So there is still a little lineage you could still follow to the original eddy current motors that I did back then. You could still find them today.
So what led to that decline in the Kenosha plant?
Well, from my perspective, after Eaton sold Dynamatic, was purchased by an owner called Eugene Hutchinson. And I believe that he thought the wave of the future was in emissions testing stands. So he put all our eggs in one basket, so to speak. And he was sure that these emission testings were going to have to be installed in all the gas stations. It was going to be required by the EPA to check all of these cars, and he thought he was on the forefront. And when this new law went into effect, we were going to have business unlimited. Well, that didn't turn out that way. The legislation that led to that didn't happen, and unfortunately, the core part of the business wasn't maintained. And once they lost that and their creditors, it kind of was, I think it spelled the end of the company. That, and then the other thing that was when I first came there, we did the controllers for the eddy current motors, and they moved that to Oldsmar, Florida. And in my opinion, I thought they were thinking that they could get better workforce, cheaper, and that's what they found was they found an inferior workforce compared to the one that we had here in this Midwest town of Kenosha. And if they had just left that part of the business there, I believe we'd still be working.
So, number of employees during your time there?
I had 105 when I was running the floor. I had 105 employees, and that was way down. I mean, I'm sure there was numbers in the 300 or 400s, you know, when they were really, really rolling well.
What was the relationship like between the workforce and the management?
You know, since I had came from the floor into management, and I was pro-union. I believed working with the workforce on the floor was the best way. Everybody working together was the best way to get things done. And even in the last year I was there, in bankruptcy, we still increased business almost 10% there. And that was, you know, if we would have just been given an opportunity, an equal opportunity, I think we really could have made that company roll.
Did you have a group, you mentioned the Three Bobs, and a group that you socialized with, or
well,
anything like that?
what we actually had was called the Dynamatic Club. And every week, I don't know how many employees, out at 105, probably 80 of them, I would guess, everybody threw in whatever it was, $5 a week or something like that came out of your paycheck. Well, then 4 times a year, they would do something. They would have, in the winter time, they would have an ice fishing derby. Springtime, it was a golf outing, golf and fish if you wanted. Summertime was a picnic. And at Christmas time, they would rent out a hall, and if you had children, you put your names down. They had presents for every child that walked in the door. Everybody, the Dynamatic Club was a way for everybody from work, regardless of what your position was, to get together. And yeah, you know what? It was, it's almost sad that that isn't the way it is anymore. I miss a lot of those people.
So what year did the Kenosha plant shut down?
It was between 2003 and 4. It was right in there. I don't know the exact day. It was about 2 years after I left. So that's, like I said, and then they moved it to Racine, you know, once they closed this factory down.
So what were the circumstances with the end of your employment with the company?
Well, they had laid some of us off, and the insurance got to be where it was on again and off again. And with 2 small children, I just couldn't work for the factory anymore without insurance being guaranteed. So during this 3 weeks that they laid me off, I went to CNH and I applied, and I ended up going to work there, which was a lateral and actually a move up for me. I was fortunate. I was only 40 years old, 41. Not so hard for a guy at that age to get a job, but a lot of the older people that were in their 50s and 60s didn't find it quite so easy, and it was pretty much unfair that they really had to go out and look for a new job.
What was the best part about your time at Dynamatic?
Oh boy. You know what? I would say, you know, like the Dynamatic Club, you know, the meetings, everybody, the playing with a small group of guys playing chess on second shift. Does it seem like that would be a thing that most people would look forward to or remember? But I like doing that. You know, I like training people. I had a lady called Bernice, and she was an older lady in shipping and receiving, and when they changed the new system over, she was ready to walk out the door. She wasn't gonna relearn and start over at her age. I convinced her to stay, and I worked with her every day until she got it. And 3 weeks later, she was doing it on her own. And she was so happy and so glad that she stayed there, you know. So I would say just little things like that. You know, her and Louise Carney, just fabulous, hard-working, good people to be associated with.
That neighborhood in those times, it was a very busy, industrialized neighborhood.
Sure. You had, well, of course, you had Dynamatic was here. You had Mick White's on the end, and you had Peter Purse was across the street. Wells Company was in there, and then probably maybe some of the most popular spots was the main event. There's a bar on each corner, and anybody who worked over there, don't tell me you never went to the bar, because certainly we all had a meeting there once in a while.
Sure. So the best things, what were the, I hate to say the worst, but the most challenging parts about being of your time at Dynamatic?
Well, of course, originally when you learn all, because they had like 5 different machining centers, and you'd have to spend time learning that. But once you learned all of that, the hardest part for me was when we went into bankruptcy and having to manage the company and buy products and get your motors shipped. It became a struggle at times.
With, like, I think you mentioned with in bankruptcy, when a trucker would come in with a load of material that you needed, they expected to be paid right away.
Yeah, in fact, the trucker that last happened to, he actually is a friend of mine. He's a friend of one of my friends. Yeah, and he came in and he says, well, before I can leave this product, I need a check for X amount of dollars. And I did my best to make that happen, but I couldn't that particular time. So he loaded up the semi and drove out the door with it. Wow. And we needed those castings, believe me.
Anything else you'd like to share about that time, those 15 years?
Oh, I kind of think of it as a learning experience, like most people do in life. And a lot of times, it's not what you end up doing, but a lot of things are like steps. You took this job, you learned this, and then maybe another door opened. It was a little bit different, So, all right, well then, the funny thing is, I never had anything to do with cribs, but I had Dan Sticka that ran one crib for me in the front, and then we had another guy in the back, Larry LaPlante. Well, when I went to CNH, he's looking and it's like, well, this ain't necessarily what you were doing, but you had cribs under your control. Would you be interested in running the maintenance crib at CNH at Case? So that's where I went. So I don't know. I don't have anything bad to say about it. Like most things in life, one door closes and another one opens up, and you got to be open to that. And I think when you work in the manufacturing fields nowadays, you almost have to expect that. If you think you're going to get 40 years in a pension in a place nowadays, good luck. It's just not. It's not prevalent like it was back then. Pensions were a big thing. Taking care of your employees was a big thing. I don't feel quite the same about that anymore.
What about the 3 Bobs that made such an impression on your time there?
Well,
did you stay in touch with them after?
Bob, unfortunately, 2 of the Bobs are gone. Bob Tofree sent his kid to St. Joe's, and I think his granddaughter was a prolific basketball player. I mean, if you look Tofree, and she was quite the player. And Bobby Cooks, I actually used to do some fishing with, and I'd see him and hang out a little bit. I like Bob, but he's gone. And Bob Yorks, I seen him probably about 5 or 6 years ago was the last time I seen him. I was actually at another guy from Dynamatic, Larry Metalis, and him and Bob Yorks were best of friends, and that's where I seen him last. But he's the only Bob that's left.
Yeah. Well, people make an impression on you on that.
Well, I still remember him. I still, I just really, I can't. I learned so much. And I think, I think the attitude for most young people is, and when you go in a situation like that and you're the youngest person on the floor and everybody around you holds the knowledge that you want to obtain, I think the best thing to do is to keep your eyes open your ears open and your mouth closed. And I think if you could do that and earn their respect. And even Larry LaPlante, I mean, they used to pick on me endlessly. Just because I was youngest machinist. I was new guy on the floor. And I'm like, Larry, Jesus, why do you always pick on me, Larry? You know? He's like, you know, Terry, he says, if we didn't like you, he says, we wouldn't pick on you. He said, we would just had nothing to do with you. So somebody's picking on you, it's all good natured.
Okay. Okay, Terry, well, thank you again. On behalf of the Kenosha History Center Museum and Kenosha Community Media, thank you so much for participating in the Kenosha Voices program.
All right, well, thank you for having me today.